He thought he was untouchable until I flipped the script and turned it into his worst nightmare. Now he has to live with it every day. Welcome to the Beaver's Den channel. Before starting, please hit the like button and subscribe so we can continue making stories like this. The sound of his laughter still haunts me, not because it was particularly memorable, but because of what it represented: mockery, arrogance, and the assumption that I was beneath him. Richard Calloway, the self-proclaimed real estate king, stood there in his tailored suit, chuckling at my home like it was some kind of joke. His words weren't just insults. They were a challenge, a declaration that he was better than me, that people like me were nothing but background noise in his world of power and wealth. But what he didn't know was that I don't take challenges lightly. That laugh, that smug smirk, those words, they set something in motion that day, something he never saw coming. Because in the end, it wasn't him who got the last laugh, it was me. And when I was done, he wasn't looking at my house anymore. He was looking at his former property, now covered in asphalt and painted parking lines. It all started with something so simple: me standing outside, tending to my yard on a quiet afternoon. My house wasn't grand, but it was mine, and I took pride in keeping it up. A little worn? Sure. In need of a new coat of paint? Probably. But it was home, and that meant something to me. I was fixing a loose board on my fence when I heard it, the unmistakable, sharp bark of laughter that instantly put me on edge. Turning my head, I saw him leaning against his car, sunglasses perched on his perfect slick-haired head, amusement all over his face. "Fixing up that shack again?" he called out, his voice dripping with mockery. I set my hammer down slowly, sizing him up. "At least I take care of my place," I shot back. "Not everyone throws money around and expects respect for it." That only seemed to entertain him further. "Respect is earned by power, not sentiment," he said, shaking his head. "You should sell that dump before it collapses." And with that, he turned, tossing his keys to his chauffeur as he strolled up the steps of his mansion like he hadn't just insulted my entire existence. I should have let it go. I really should have. After all, he was just another rich jerk who thought the world revolved around him. But something about that interaction stuck with me. Maybe it was the sheer arrogance. Maybe it was the fact that he didn't even see me as a person, just another nameless peasant in his kingdom. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because I knew something he didn't. Calloway wasn't untouchable. He wasn't invincible, and I was about to prove it. I started paying attention to Calloway after that. Not just because I wanted revenge, but because I was curious about what made him tick, about where he thought his power came from. And most importantly, I wanted to know if there was a way to hit him where it really hurt. He was big in real estate, sure. Owned office buildings, rental properties, commercial lots. He had a hand in half the development projects in town. But for all his wealth, he wasn't as careful as he liked to think. He had properties just sitting there, waiting for the right moment to flip them for profit. One in particular caught my eye, a rundown commercial lot just a few blocks away. The more I looked into it, the more interesting it became. The lot had been his for years, but he hadn't developed it. Maybe he was waiting for the value to go up. Maybe he had bigger plans, but one thing was certain: the city wasn't happy about it. Regulations encouraged commercial development, and Calloway was already on thin ice for leaving the lot untouched. Fines were coming his way, restrictions were piling up, and the pressure was mounting. That was my opening. I started asking around, talking to people who had worked with Calloway, people who had been burned by his ruthless tactics. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who wanted to see him taken down a peg. There were business owners who had lost their storefronts because of his buyouts, families forced out of rental homes when he jacked up prices, contractors who got stiffed on payments. The guy had enemies, and plenty of them. Then, I caught wind of something even better. Calloway was in financial trouble. Not the kind that would bankrupt him, but just enough to make him sweat. One of his high-profile deals had gone south, and he needed quick cash to cover the fallout. That meant he was looking to unload some of his less valuable properties to balance the books, including the lot I had my eye on. I knew I couldn't go to Calloway directly. If he knew it was me, he'd never sell. So I went through a third party, a real estate contact I trusted, someone Calloway wouldn't suspect was connected to me. We put in an offer, not too high, not too eager. Just enough to make it seem like an easy sale, like we were doing him a favor by taking it off his hands. It worked. Within a few weeks, the deal was done. The lot was mine. I stood there the day the papers were finalized, looking out over the cracked pavement and overgrown weeds. This was it, the first step in turning the tables. Calloway had laughed at my home, dismissed me like I was nothing. But now I had something he used to own, something he had let slip through his fingers. And I wasn't done yet. No, this was only the beginning. There's something exhilarating about taking what someone never thought they'd lose, about watching the moment realization dawns on their face, the second they understand that the rules of the game have changed, that the world they built on arrogance is starting to crack. I had just bought Richard Calloway's property right from under his nose, and he didn't even know it yet. That was the best part. It hadn't even hit him. Not yet. But soon, very soon, he was going to realize what had happened. And when he did, that's when the fun would really begin. Even though the property was legally mine, the battle wasn't over. Calloway wasn't the type to take a loss lightly, and I knew that once he figured out what I had done, he would fight to take it back. I wasn't just playing against money. I was playing against a man who had built his empire by crushing people under his heel. So I had to be smart. The day after the deal closed, I walked onto the lot for the first time as its rightful owner. Weeds had overgrown the edges, cracks split the pavement, and old, sun-bleached construction signs hung from rusted poles. It looked like an afterthought, a forgotten piece of real estate left to decay. And yet, to me, it was the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. This was Calloway's weakness. He had been so busy scooping up properties, playing the long game of real estate speculation, that he hadn't realized that this particular piece of his empire had slipped through his fingers. I ran my fingers over the edge of a broken sign and smiled. The moment he found out, I wanted to be there. I wanted to see his reaction, to watch his expression shift from indifference to realization. So, I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks after the deal had closed, Calloway finally noticed. It happened in the most fitting way possible, by accident. I was on the lot, surveying the land, going over paperwork with my contractor, when a sleek black luxury car pulled up on the curb. I knew that car. I'd seen it enough times to recognize it anywhere. Sure enough, the driver's door swung open, and he stepped out. Richard Calloway. He wasn't laughing now. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at me like I didn't belong. His gaze swept across the lot, then back to me, his brow furrowing slightly, as if trying to piece together why I was there. He adjusted the cuffs of his suit, an unconscious habit of his whenever he was irritated. Then, as if it had just dawned on him, he took a slow step forward. "This is private property," he said smoothly, as if correcting a misbehaving child. "You shouldn't be here." I turned to face him fully, taking my time, letting the moment drag out. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the deed. It was a simple piece of paper, really, just ink and legal jargon. But at that moment, it was the most powerful thing in the world. I held it up between 2 fingers. "Actually," I said, my voice deliberately calm, "this property belongs to me." Calloway blinked. The first crack in his composure appeared, a slight twitch in his jaw. "Excuse me?" I let a smirk creep onto my face. "You heard me. I own this lot now." For a few seconds, he didn't move, didn't speak. His mind was working, trying to figure out if this was some kind of joke, if I was bluffing, if he had somehow misheard me. But no, there it was, in black and white, right in front of him. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He exhaled sharply through his nose, and then, just like that, the mask slid back into place. His expression smoothed over into something resembling amusement, though I could tell he was seething underneath. "Well," he said, forcing a chuckle, "I suppose congratulations are in order. Didn't know you had it in you." I shrugged. "Guess you don't know me as well as you thought." His gaze flickered to the document again, as if searching for a loophole, something he could cling to. I could practically hear the gears in his head turning, formulating a plan to take the lot back. But he wouldn't find one, because I had played this game better than him. I knew it wouldn't end there. Calloway wasn't the type to accept defeat. If he couldn't buy his way out of a problem, he'd try to manipulate, pressure, or intimidate his way through it. Sure enough, it only took 3 days before the first offer came in, a clean, crisp email from one of Callaway's lawyers. Dear Mr. Last Name, we recently became aware of your acquisition of property address. Mr. Callaway would like to extend a formal offer to purchase the property at 150% of your purchase price. Please let us know if you are willing to discuss. Regards, Callaway Real Estate Holdings, 150%. A tempting offer. A very tempting offer. Most people would have jumped at it. A quick flip, a solid profit, and I could walk away without any further hassle. But that wasn't the point. This wasn't about money. It was about principle. I let the email sit for a full day before replying. Dear Callaway Holdings, thank you for your interest in the property. Unfortunately, I'm not looking to sell at this time. Regards, short, polite, firm. The next day, the offer increased to 175%. I ignored it. By the end of the week, the number had climbed to 200%. Still, I refused. And that's when the threats started. Callaway was done playing nice. The emails became more aggressive. Legal jargon started getting thrown around. Questions about zoning restrictions, threats of potential complications if I proceeded with any development. Then, one morning, I stepped outside to find an inspector standing in front of my property, clipboard in hand. I've been sent to do a compliance check, he said. Routine procedure. Routine, my ass. Callaway was pulling strings, trying to find anything he could use against me. But the thing about playing dirty, it only works when the other person doesn't see it coming. I had anticipated this. I had done my research. My paperwork was spotless, my permits were secured, and my connections in local government were already aware of what was going on. The inspector found nothing. And just like that, Callaway had hit a wall. A week later, I saw him again. This time, he wasn't smiling. He pulled up next to me outside the lot, rolled down his window, and studied me with narrowed eyes. "What do you want?" he finally asked. I smiled. "Oh, you'll see." And with that, I walked away, leaving him sitting in his expensive car, gripping the wheel a little too tightly. Because this was only the beginning. Callaway thought he could buy his way out of anything. He was about to learn that sometimes money isn't enough. There's a special kind of satisfaction in watching a powerful man squirm, in knowing that the empire he built, brick by brick, is about to take a hit he never saw coming. Richard Callaway thought he could buy me out, pressure me, and manipulate his way back into control. But what he didn't realize was that I had already set my next move in motion. Owning the property wasn't enough. No, I wanted something more. I wanted him to feel every single inch of his loss. And the best way to do that? Turn his once prized land into the most humiliating thing imaginable, a parking lot. Because nothing screams insignificance like a slab of asphalt, painted lines, and a sign charging $2 an hour. The idea hit me like a lightning bolt. At first, I toyed with different ideas, maybe a small business, maybe a community center, but none of it felt right. None of it felt like justice. Then I thought about who Callaway was, a man who lived for real estate, a man who hated wasted potential, and what could be more wasteful in his eyes than a plot of land reduced to nothing but parked cars and oil stains? That's when it clicked. This wasn't just revenge, it was poetic justice. I knew if I wanted this to work, I had to act fast. The moment Callaway realized my real plan, he'd throw everything he had at stopping me. So I got to work. First, I needed permits. A standard commercial parking lot required zoning approvals, environmental assessments, and city council sign-offs, all things that could slow me down if I wasn't careful. But here's where the beauty of Callaway's arrogance worked against him. Because he had left this property sitting for years, the city was already frustrated with him. They wanted something, anything, to be built there. The moment I applied, I was met with nothing but enthusiasm. "You're actually going to do something with it?" one official said, shaking my hand. We were about ready to start finding Callaway. I grinned. Well, I'm not Callaway. Within weeks, my permits were approved. Step 1. Complete. It didn't take long before Callaway caught wind of my plans. He had thought I was just sitting on the land, playing some amateur power game, but when he saw the surveyors, the trucks, and the construction signs going up, that's when he realized I wasn't just holding the lot, I was building something. and he hated it. One morning, I was overseeing the first stage of demolition, clearing out the debris left behind from the years of neglect, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "You can't be serious." I turned around. There he was, standing in his overpriced suit, arms crossed, jaw tight with irritation. "Oh, I'm very serious," I replied, flashing him a smile. "A parking lot?" He scoffed, looking around like he was hoping someone would tell him this was a joke. "You're turning my property into a parking lot?" I let that last part sink in. My property. He hated hearing it. I shrugged. "People need places to park." His face darkened. "You're wasting prime real estate." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I'm making sure it gets used." He clenched his jaw, inhaling sharply through his nose. "I'll buy it back. Name your price." I chuckled. "I told you before, I'm not selling." The muscle in his cheek twitched. "This is a mistake," he muttered. "A huge mistake." "For you, maybe," I said. "For me, this is the best investment I've ever made." Then I turned away, signaling to the workers to continue. Calloway could do nothing but stand there and watch. I knew he wasn't done. Within days, the obstacles started appearing. First, a legal notice, some nonsense about environmental concerns. But I had already covered that. My permits were clean. The city wasn't on his side anymore. Then came the fake protesters, a small group of people holding signs about saving green spaces. Funny thing was, the lot had been nothing but rotting concrete and trash for years. He had paid them, of course. But that failed too. Then the threats. One night I got a call, a deep voice, likely a hired goon. "Sell the lot," the voice said, "or things might get complicated." I laughed. Complicated for who? Click. It was cute that Calloway thought intimidation would work on me. He didn't realize that the more he pushed, the more I enjoyed seeing him struggle. Despite Calloway's pathetic attempts, construction moved forward. Within weeks, the lot was fully paved. Fresh asphalt, crisp white parking lines, security cameras installed, and automated payment machines set up. The finishing touch? The sign. I had spent weeks debating what to name the lot. Something simple? Something petty? In the end, I settled on something that would burn Calloway every time he drove past. The Calloway lot. A tribute, a joke, a slap in the face. The day before the grand opening, I saw him again. He didn't look as polished this time. He looked frustrated. "You've made your point," he said, his voice tight. I tilted my head. "What point is that?" He exhaled sharply. "You don't need to do this." "Oh, but I do." His eyes flashed. "You think this is funny?" I grinned. "I think it's poetic." For the first time since I had known him, Calloway looked uncertain. His whole life, he had been the one with the upper hand, the one who won. But this time, he had lost, and he knew it. The next morning, I stood in front of the lot as we cut the ribbon. A small crowd had gathered. Business owners, neighbors, people who had all been pushed around by Calloway at some point. The first car rolled in. The automated system printed a ticket. $2 per hour. A far cry from the multi-million-dollar development Calloway had probably dreamed of. I spotted him across the street, standing outside his mansion, watching. I raised my hand in a mock salute, his fists clenched. Then, finally, he turned and walked back inside. I laughed. Because now, every time he stepped outside his front door, the first thing he'd see was my parking lot. There's something deeply satisfying about watching a man who once thought he was untouchable finally realize he's lost. And Richard Calloway, he was losing hard. The parking lot wasn't just a success, it was a spectacle. People loved it. Not because it was some groundbreaking development, but because it humiliated him. Every day, cars rolled in, engines idling in the very space that could have been his next luxury project. Instead of towering office buildings and ritzy high-rises, all that sat on his once prized land was a sea of parked sedans, pickup trucks, and the occasional minivan with a sun-faded bumper sticker. And the best part? Every single day, Calloway had to see it. From his front windows, from his balcony, from his driveway. There was no escaping it. And he was livid. It was bound to happen. Calloway had been playing it cool, ignoring the lot, pretending it didn't bother him. But everyone could see the tension brewing beneath the surface. Then, one afternoon, the inevitable happened. It started with a horn. A regular Tuesday, the lot was packed as usual. A woman in a silver SUV was struggling to back into a space when a man in a red sports car, probably in a hurry, laid on his horn. The noise must have hit Calloway's last nerve, because not 5 seconds later, his front door slammed open. Heads turned as he stormed across the street. At first, people assumed he was just going for a walk, but then he marched straight into the lot. I had been sitting at the small office near the entrance, drinking coffee, waiting for something like this. "Hey!" Calloway barked. His voice boomed across the pavement. The woman in the SUV froze. The guy in the sports car lowered his window. "What the hell is this?" Calloway shouted, arms flailing as he gestured to the cars. "This is my neighborhood, not some damn traffic stop." Nobody responded. Because what do you even say to a rich guy screaming at a parking lot? I stood up and strolled over, keeping my expression as neutral as possible. "Calloway," I said casually. "Something wrong?" His head snapped toward me so fast I thought he might get whiplash. "Wrong?" he seethed. "You think this is funny?" I sipped my coffee. "Oh, I think it's hilarious." He took a step closer, his eyes burning. "You don't belong here." I smirked. "But I own here." It was the exact moment he lost his temper. With a furious growl, he turned and kicked one of the parking lot signs. The metal frame rattled, the laminated notice bending slightly. But all he got for his tantrum was a bruised foot and dozens of people staring at him like he'd lost his mind. "You okay, Calloway?" I asked, barely holding back a laugh. His nostrils flared, his hands curled into fists. Then, as if realizing he was making a scene, he gritted his teeth and stormed off, his expensive loafers clacking against the pavement. The second he disappeared into his mansion, the murmurs began. "Did you see that? Dude lost it. Man, I hope he tries to sue. That'd be fun to watch." I just grinned, because that was only the beginning. Calloway was fuming. He had spent years getting his way, buying people out, crushing small businesses, silencing critics. But he couldn't buy me. So, he tried the next best thing, suing me. 1 week after his public meltdown, I received a thick legal packet from his team. Pages and pages of nonsense, claiming the lot was lowering the value of the neighborhood, causing increased traffic and noise disturbances, disrupting the aesthetic integrity of the area. It was, in short, a temper tantrum in legal form. But here's the thing. I had expected this. The moment I bought the lot, I had hired the best land use attorney I could find. Every permit, every zoning approval, every city regulation, I had it covered. So when we went to court, my lawyer didn't just shut down Calloway's arguments. He embarrassed him. The judge looked bored out of his mind as Calloway's team tried to argue that a legal business, a functioning parking lot, was a public nuisance. And then, my lawyer dropped the bombshell. The plaintiff, Mr. Calloway, has been accumulating fines for the past 3 years for leaving this lot undeveloped. Silence. Then the judge arched a brow at Calloway. "Is that true?" Calloway's lawyer fumbled, flipping through papers. I watched as Calloway clenched his jaw so hard I thought his teeth might crack. It was true. He had been sitting on the lot, dodging fines, waiting to flip it for profit. But since I had legally developed it, his entire argument fell apart. 5 minutes later, the case was dismissed. And just like that, Calloway lost again. After the lawsuit, Calloway's rage turned into pure obsession. He started watching the parking lot. I'd catch him standing on his balcony, arms crossed, just glaring. He even tried to bribe my employees. One of my parking attendants came to me one day and said, "Hey, that Calloway guy offered me $5,000 to quit." I laughed. "Take the money if you want." The attendant smirked. "Nah, this job's way too fun." But the best part? The final, glorious insult? I rented out one of the parking spots right in front of his house. Then I leased it to a hot dog stand, every single day. Calloway had to walk outside and see a line of people buying chili dogs and nachos right across from his driveway. The smell of grilled onions and mustard drifting into his $1,000,000 home. It was perfect. One evening, as the sun set over the lot, I was locking up when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and there he was. But this time, he didn't look angry. He looked defeated. He didn't even have a snarky remark ready. He just stood there, staring at the pavement, hands shoved into his pockets. "How much?" he finally asked. I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" He swallowed hard. "The lot." I smiled. "Not for sale." His jaw tightened. For the first time, Richard Calloway had lost, and he knew it. Richard Calloway was broken. I had taken his property. I had turned it into the pettiest, most insulting thing imaginable, a parking lot. and I had crushed every pathetic attempt he made to stop me. But I wasn't done yet. Because if Calloway thought the parking lot itself was humiliating, he had no idea what I had planned next. The grand opening wasn't just going to be an event, it was going to be a celebration, a monument to his failure, and it was going to be legendary. I wanted everyone in town to know about the parking lot, so I went all out. Big banners, flyers, social media ads, radio spots, billboards. I made sure that wherever Calloway went, he'd see my ads. The Calloway lot, now open, affordable parking right in the heart of the city. I even ran special promotions, free parking for the first 100 cars, discounted rates for local businesses, VIP spots available, reserve yours today. But the cherry on top, the huge digital sign I installed right across from Calloway's mansion. Every single night, it lit up with bold neon letters, "Welcome to the Calloway lot, park with pride." And Calloway, oh, he was losing his mind. People loved it. It wasn't just a parking lot anymore. It was an event. Social media was buzzing. People were laughing, sharing photos, making memes. Calloway had spent years acting like he owned this town, buying up land, jacking up prices, pushing out small businesses. Now, he was the joke. One day, I walked past a group of teenagers taking selfies under the giant Calloway lot sign. I heard one of them say, "Man, this is the best thing to happen to this town." I grinned, because he was right. The morning of the grand opening, I woke up early. I wanted to savor every moment. I arrived at the lot at 7 a.m., and there was already a line of cars waiting to park. Vendors were setting up booths. Local news reporters were setting up their cameras. And best of all, across the street, standing on his balcony, arms crossed, face like thunder, was Calloway. He watched in silent fury as people rolled into his former land, paying me for the privilege. The irony? Some of the people parking in my lot were his own business associates. They didn't care about his ego. They just wanted cheap parking, and I gave it to them. At noon, the event was in full swing. A stage had been set up near the entrance. A local politician had even come to cut the ribbon. "We're here today to celebrate a new addition to our community," he announced, grinning. "Thanks to my name, this once abandoned property is now a thriving business." Applause. Cheers. I took the microphone, glanced across the street at Calloway's house, and smiled. "It's an honor to provide a service for this great city," I said, "and I want to thank a very special person, Richard Calloway." The crowd laughed. I turned toward his house, tipped my imaginary hat, and bowed. I swear, if looks could kill, Calloway would have set me on fire with his eyes. The politician cut the ribbon. The crowd roared. And just like that, the Calloway lot was officially open for business. I had expected Calloway to be mad, but I hadn't expected him to completely lose it in front of half the town. About an hour after the grand opening, I was chatting with some business owners when I heard screaming. I turned and saw Calloway storming across the street like a man possessed. His face was red, his fists clenched, his voice booming. "This is a joke." People turned to watch as he marched straight toward me. "You think this is funny?" he shouted, voice cracking. "You think humiliating me is some kind of game?" I just raised an eyebrow. "Calloway," I said calmly, "you're trespassing." He froze. For a second, I thought he might actually punch me. Instead, he let out a furious growl and kicked over one of the parking cones. That's when the news cameras turned toward him. People started filming. I stepped closer, lowered my voice, and said, "Smile, Calloway. You're going viral." His eyes widened. He turned, saw dozens of phones recording him, and his rage died on his face. Without another word, he turned and walked away. The second he was gone, the crowd burst into laughter. A reporter turned to me. "How do you feel about today's success?" I grinned. "Absolutely fantastic." After that day, Calloway was never the same. His business took a hit. Investors lost faith in him. His ego shattered. And me, I had one last touch to add to my masterpiece. I ordered a custom-made plaque and had it bolted into the entrance sign. It read, "The Calloway Lot, a generous donation from Richard Calloway himself." It was the final knife in the wound. He tried one last time to buy the lot back. He sent his assistant to make me a final offer, triple what I paid. I looked at the check, laughed, and ripped it in half. Not for sale. And that was it. That was the moment Calloway finally gave up. Weeks passed, then months. The lot remained a success, and Calloway, he moved away. He couldn't take it anymore. Every single day, he had to see the reminder of his failure, and eventually he just left. His mansion went up for sale, he vanished from town, and me, I had won. I stood in the lot one evening, watching the cars pull in, hearing the beeping of the automated ticket machine. I had started this journey because of an insult, because one man thought he could laugh at me. But in the end, the last laugh belonged to me. Richard Calloway was gone. His mansion stood empty, his name became a punchline, and his legacy crumbled like an abandoned building. But I wasn't satisfied just yet, because here's the thing about revenge, it's never truly over. There's always one last piece to the puzzle, and I was about to deliver the final blow. A few months after Calloway left town, something unexpected happened. I got a call from a real estate agent. "Hey," she said, "I know this is out of the blue, but I have a client who wants to buy your lot." I smirked. "Not for sale." She hesitated. "They're offering 5 times what you paid for it." That made me pause. 5 times? That was stupid money. "Who's the buyer?" I asked. There was a silence. "I can't say," she said finally, "but let's just say he's very familiar with the property." I sat back, processing the information. There was only one person desperate enough to do this. Calloway. He was trying to sneak back in. Now this was interesting. I had assumed Calloway had run for good, licking his wounds in some other city, but no, he wanted his land back, which meant he hadn't really let it go. Which meant I still had power over him. And that was a dangerous thing. Because when a man like Calloway is desperate, he gets reckless. And reckless men make mistakes. 3 nights after I turned down the offer, something strange happened. At exactly 2:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with a security alert. Motion detected, the Calloway lot. I sat up, checked the camera feed, and there he was, Calloway, standing in the middle of the lot, alone, hands shoved into his pockets, just staring. At what? I didn't know. Maybe at everything he lost. Maybe at everything he thought he could take back. I zoomed in. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. This wasn't the same cocky, arrogant man I had gone to war with. This was someone haunted, and I wondered, was it regret? Was it obsession? Or was it something worse? The next day, he finally showed his hand. I was at the lot when I saw his car pull up. He stepped out slowly, dressed in something less polished than usual. No suit, no arrogance, just Calloway looking defeated. I leaned against the ticket machine. "Didn't think I'd see you again," he exhaled. "I just want to talk." I gestured to the lot. "You're already parked. Might as well make it worth it." He chuckled, a dry, empty sound, and then he told me the truth. "I didn't just lose money when you took this from me," he admitted, staring at the pavement. I stayed silent. "I lost everything." I arched an eyebrow. "Because of a parking lot?" He shook his head. "Because of what it represents." Now that caught my interest. He sighed, rubbing his temples. That lot, it wasn't just another property for me. It was the last thing tying me to this city. I studied him. "You had other properties, not like this one." He swallowed. "This was my father's first investment, the first lot he ever bought. He wanted to turn it into something big, something that would prove he belonged here." He chuckled bitterly. "And now it's a goddamn parking lot." For the first time, I saw the cracks in him. He wasn't just angry because he lost. He was angry because I had turned his family's legacy into an afterthought. And suddenly, this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about history. For the first time since this war started, I had the upper hand in a way I never expected. I had ruined something that meant the world to him. And now, he was begging for it back. So I had 2 choices. Sell it to him. Let him rebuild. Let him erase this whole saga like it never happened. Keep it. Cement his failure forever. I looked him in the eye. "Make me an offer." His eyes lit up with hope. "I already did." "No," I said, "a real offer." He hesitated. "How much?" I folded my arms. "What's it worth to you?" Silence. Then, finally, he sighed. And that's when I knew. He couldn't afford to get it back. Not financially, not emotionally. He had lost the will to fight. He had lost everything. And so, I smiled. "Not for sale." He closed his eyes, nodded, and then he walked away, for good. He left town a week later. No announcement, no goodbye, just gone. Some say he moved overseas, others say he never recovered, but me, I don't care, because I won. Not just the lot, not just the revenge, but the story. And that's the part people will never forget. Months passed. The lot remained. But then, something unexpected happened. A new developer approached me. "I love what you did with this place," he said, "but I have a bigger idea." I raised an eyebrow. "Bigger than a parking lot?" He grinned. "How do you feel about a skyscraper?" My mind raced. I had fought for this lot out of spite, but now maybe it was time for something more. Maybe it was time to turn my revenge into a legacy of my own. So I stood there, looking over the lot that had changed everything. A simple piece of land that had taken down a giant. And now I had a choice. Do I cement Callaway's failure forever, or do I build something even greater? The answer? Well, that's a story for another time. The end, or is it just the beginning? Did I win? Yes, but maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just about winning. Maybe this was about becoming something bigger. And who knows? Maybe someday someone else will challenge me. But until then, I'll be waiting.